Okay, all right, here we are. Liliya Ugay, I'm very glad to be with you again from this distance. First, I'd just like to introduce you, and I'll just quote for a minute from your website that you are originally from Uzbekistan, that you were raised in a Tatar and Korean music family. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that music family in a moment. That you serve as an assistant professor of composition and director of the Polymorphia Ensemble of New Music at Florida State University. Your compositions, and you can add to this because there's lots of it, and I'm not going to get all of it, have been featured at Aspen, Norfolk, Darmstadt Music Festival, and at the 52nd Venice Biennale. That must have been great. You've completed residencies at the Washington National Opera Company and American Lyric Theater. These are opera residencies. And it was at ALT, American Lyric Theater, where we met. Awards have come in from lots of places, but they include American Academy of Arts and Letters, ASCAP, Yale University, the Woodruff Foundation, and you were a finalist for the 2019 Rome Prize. Now, most of this has been about your composition, your teaching. You've won lots of prizes in international piano competitions as well, here in the United States, in Europe, and in Russia. You have a music concert series promoting the work of repressed Soviet composers, and it's called Silenced Voices. You're married, you're the mother of an adorable toddler. What have I forgotten that's really important to you?
First of all, hi. I don't think I actually greeted everyone for this recording yet. I think you mentioned everything or even more, Lorraine. I cannot think of anything else to add. Well, thank you.
We'll get more. It was a delight to work with you, to watch the music happen at American Lyric Theater. But I never understood when you started playing piano or how you started, when you were little.
Yes. So as you mentioned, I grew up in a family where my parents already played music. So my dad was a clarinetist and my mom was a violinist. And my sister, also 2 years older, she started playing piano probably at about age 6 or 7. She was also singing since early age. So it was so natural for me. I never doubted, I asked my mom to start playing piano when I was 5. So she started to teach me gradually, and then I started music school. And in Russia, in Soviet Union, there are this particularly specifically music programs, like music schools, that are meant to train young children in some way as athletes for the musical career, because it's really rigorous. It's very intense. 11, 12 years of study. Yeah. So I went through that. Simultaneously, I started composing when I was 12. I actually started taking composition lessons officially. I had a really great teacher, and then my mom arranged some additional lessons for me. So in fact, when I was 14, I was taking like 3 composition lessons a week. So it was quite intense.
It is intense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't complain. I enjoyed all of that, and I'm very grateful that I had such opportunities.
And that intensity fit with your character, yes, because you're not a casual musician.
Yes, sometimes I just feel myself like I'm just sitting here at the computer and doing my work all the time, but like when I have to update my CV or do something or write things on the website, it's like, oh gosh, this is endless amount of things I need to actually have done.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you. I'm with you there. All right. So I'd like to ask you about motifs. Our teachers, wonderful teachers at American Lyric Theater, Mark Adamo, who is a librettist and a composer, writes all of his own things. He always tells us funny stories about if something's not right, he takes himself out to dinner and flatters himself and then tells himself what he needs to do. Mark Adamo and also Corey Ellison, who's a dramaturg and a teacher at Juilliard, who was also with us. They talked about motifs. And they talked about putting motifs into the work. In fact, we were required to for this piece. Because the motifs talk to the listeners so that they know that this thing that's happening here is connected to that thing that happened. But it also gives them a way to connect through time in the opera and externally. And they clue us into things about the character or the ideas. Our producer for this, that's coming up for the Black Arts Festival at Cathedral Village, Timothy Shepard, said to me, how does she come up with motifs? Do you hear them? And he also said, what do you do if you have a trouble finding one? How do you do it?
There's so many ways to get a musical idea, right? If we talk about motif, we don't just, I, for example, don't just mean it in a way as a piece of melody. It's more than that. It's basically music material, right? It sometimes comes from the harmonic progression, some harmony that it feels especially particular for a certain subject or certain moment of the piece. It sometimes is a certain rhythm. So like, let's say if you say like ta 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 ta, you know that it's Beethoven's fifths. It's not necessarily, I didn't just sing it on pitch, I just sang the rhythm of it. Mm-hmm. So it's a rhythm in that case that becomes magic. So those musical ideas, I guess, they can come from different ways of practicing music, right? So it can come straight from improvising on piano, it can come from singing, it can come from reading, like in the case of, you have very beautiful writing that is very poetic, with words that are never casual, they're never non-personal, they're always very specific. So like, for example, reading your text, just reading it loud and with expression, I already can get a rhythm. Wow.
Right.
So there's so many ways to get it. Like sometimes it's, again, sometimes you're just improvising on piano, sometimes you're just singing, sometimes, you can even dance maybe with it. And it's just, the really important thing here is just to be very inspired, to be really thinking about what is a particular emotion, what is a particular mood that you're trying to convey.
Our singers and the pianist Jose Melendez was interested in the rhythm in the second scene, the composer scene, which is very particular. And until I watched people struggling to learn it without you there,
I'm so sorry.
Until that, I didn't realize how hard it was, right? Because I've always seen it with you doing it. What is that rhythm about? And I'll just tell you this: when I was on an artist retreat, there was a composer, and I remember I used to like to sit under his window sometimes and listen. I had no idea he was composing all this big music, but all I hear was plink, 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 plink. It was, and it sounded to me like it reminded me something about my process, but it said to me, never give up, right? Like, what is that? What is that going on? What is the rhythm doing there in that composer section?
Okay, so there are actually two questions there, right?
Yes.
So the first one about that specific page and a specific line, turned gold into straw. So that is a moment where Nana becomes very frustrated, and she's also quite irritated. And in some way, she starts thinking about it. It almost makes her shaking from anger, the way I see it. Like she becomes hysterical. So she lets her emotions out because she's also a very emotional person, as I see her. So this is just a moment when it gets a little bit over to the edge of, I guess, very realistic. That's what I would say about it.
I'll just stop there and go back, because I was talking about the composer, but you started with the Nana section where she says, and the reference is, instead of, and several times they talk about turning straw into gold, but she says to the granddaughter, I gave you, her ghost says, I gave you gold that you've turned into straw, turned into straw, turned into straw. I don't remember writing it that many times.
Yeah.
But when I heard it, that's what you did with it. You said, and she goes up higher and higher, and she is furious. I know the mezzo was talking about working on the rhythm rather than the pitch, in fact. Yeah.
Yes, and what I would say if I were there in rehearsal, I know it's bad just to say it as a composer, but work on your mood. And even if your pitch and your rhythm will be wrong, somewhat there, it will all be justified as long as you have that right mood.
Wow, that's
so as a composer, I wouldn't, I would not be upset if she's singing wrong pitches or wrong notes there, because that moment is particularly about the emotional outburst.
Oh, by the way, she is working very hard on the pitch, but she said first that she needed to get the rhythm first.
Yeah, and that's I think that's the right approach, though.
That's right. That's right. Now tell us more about the composer section, because you're a composer, and that section is very different from the first and the third.
Yes. Well, not just me, but we wanted to create a contrasting character. And so as much as it might sound sort of counterintuitive, but the composer there is actually the one who's very pragmatic and very correct, and does everything by the book. Yes. So he's in some kind of a box, while my Nana and granddaughter, they're very emotional, very open. So that was my goal in some ways, to show this person who used to work very meticulously and always does things right. So I think that's what the music is doing there. And there are these little moments when he's kind of getting out of his frame. And those, I think, are really funny, because you suddenly see him like more in a more real way, like in a more open way. And then he becomes a little bit of a, not a teacher, but like he starts to mentor granddaughter, saying, so you should do this because your grandmother did all of that, and I already put all the notes on the page. Yeah. But answering your other question about you hearing composer writing and then being just a few notes, this absolutely doesn't surprise me. You probably will hear the same from me if you would hear ever anything at all. But there is a composition process is quite long. It takes time. The musical ideas themselves, they come quickly. So you might record them, or you might immediately write them on the paper, but then developing them, it actually takes a while. Writing them out, developing them, orchestrating, and that kind of work, a lot of it is inner ear and mental. So you likely you won't be able to most likely play it on the instrument. So you probably just need to catch, to check certain pitch or certain harmony or little motif just for yourself, to remind yourself how it sounds. But you probably won't need to play it as you would imagine, over and over. So this is just a process. Yeah.
that it really is fascinating. Um, You know, one of the things that sometimes happens when you have an audience is other people ask questions. And I really feel right about now that I wish I had brought in other people at this moment to ask their questions of you, right? Because I know there's so many that will come up. I may actually just email you one or two and write a little blog to accompany this. But I think what we love right before new music are more opportunities to get a sense of the music and understand it. Are there good ways that you have where you can tell us about key signature or major or minor in those decisions? For this, I didn't put this in our email, of course, but is there anything you can tell us about that as people who do not compose that would be good for us to be listening out for?
In this piece?
In this piece, yes.
So I think what could be listened to, particularly in this piece, is juxtaposition of music that clearly sounds from elsewhere and the music that is straight in that happening in the moment of the story. So as you know, there are moments where I intentionally bring different style of music. There are moments where Nana is actually singing the opera that she imagines, yes, which is like sort of Mozart, Puccini-esque a little bit version. So like if you what you would imagine, like I guess an older person would imagine as the perfect opera. And those moments happen throughout the opera. So this is something definitely to listen to and to wait for. And then aside from that, there are arias. There are arias both for the Nana and for granddaughter that are very personal. So they're always first shown, each of them are shown first in such kind of very outsider view. So we just see them and we see them as like the person who will see the first time. But then they get into aria, and aria is something that actually shows their inner feelings and their real self. And so those are the moments that especially personal, they're personal to me. I'm sure they're personal to you, Lorraine. And they're personal to this music that are meant to kind of get deeper into the character. Yes, and then there is a bell. I think you haven't asked about it yet. This is your bell. This is wonderful because that bell actually was something that inspired me for the idea of the opening.
That's great.
Because at that time I haven't heard this particular bell yet. I just knew that there was supposed to be a bell.
Right.
So this was a bell for me. And then like once you brought this, I was like, this is fantastic. This is perfect.
That's it.
So yeah, that bell starts it and the bell ends it. So the bell is this is a little theatric element, I guess, but it's in the music as well. So it's beyond the actual object.
Yes.
It's something that evokes a memory, evokes a certain world of this woman.
Right. And bells evoke so many things to so many people. What I love about theatrical bits and music is that it can have a particular meaning, but also connects to other things. I mean, the Buddhist meditation begins and ends with the prayer. Shavasana, which also is telling us this is corpse pose. And there's a bell. I just also want to tell you that behind me, this is Nana's china closet, and these are her favorite.
Her treasures.
Yeah, her favorite things, including the doll there during that period of Orientalism, that Chinese doll that I was sometimes allowed. She would take it out, and I could touch it very carefully.
Wow.
Yeah,
this is beautiful. Yeah.
All righty. So we'll listen out for a nice little opera in my name. Right. So we're going to listen for that Nana wants a nice little opera in her name. And then we're going to also listen at the end. You have this lyrical bit where the two are singing a duet together.
About Niagara Falls.
About Niagara Falls. And it is the most lyrical and piece, I think, bit in the piece. I must tell you that our neighbor, who was 9 or 10, they were in New York. They came, the parents came and they brought their children. And the 9-year-old, when that began, she heard, because the enunciation of the singers was so amazing, she heard the grandmother say that she's going. And she says, where I'm going, I don't need paper or a bell.
Right.
And the girl looked at the mother, and our mother is our neighbor. She said her tears sprang into her eyes, and she said, is she going to die? And the music told her that, told that 9-year-old.
Well, you told it to me, right? So I the music.
Great. All right. Well,
so beautiful. Though, thank you for sharing this. I think it's very precious.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going to be looking forward to this, and I've put the libretto somewhere below this. I'm not quite sure how we're going to make it, but we'll make that available for those of you who are not hearing all the words, online and would like to follow along. Think of it as super titles. And we're also going to make the SoundCloud recording available. And that's one that Liliya recorded while you were still a PhD candidate at Yale and with your colleagues in music. And all of their names will be listed as well there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lori.
Thank you so much.